Hi guys, what is up? Welcome back to another video. Today you join me in the 2022 Kia Proceed, a car that is designed to be for people who need some practicality but want stylish looks at the same time. And I'm going to crack right on with the styling. Now, this car is kind of in a very niche segment, right? It's for people who need a bit of practicality. They need space in the cabin. They need a relatively large and spacious boot, but they don't want to sacrifice the look of the car, and they're not really up for a small SUV. And there's not many cars in this segment, to be honest. There's this, and then if you kind of step up a little bit, you've got the Mercedes CLA. That's in a slightly higher price bracket. And then if you want to go up in size, you've got the CLS shooting brake. And then you've got the Porsche Panamera. But there's not really an awful lot else. It's quite a small segment, really. But it accounts for a decent portion of Kia's sales, and I can see why, because from the outside, it really is quite a stylish thing. It goes with all the kind of modern Kia quirks, like the 4 LED running lights at the front and the really nice light bar that runs across the rear, and that sweeping body line that looks almost like a coupe, but has that kind of estate vibe to it as well. And you get a bit of the best of both worlds, really. You get that kind of curvy shape at the rear, a bit like the Panamera, but at the same time you've got quite a large boot opening and a massive boot capacity of just under 600 litres in this particular car. I think it looks quite striking, to be honest, and in this metallic white as well, which is an optional extra, it really finishes it off quite nicely. I do think I prefer it in black to look a little bit more stealthy. There are definitely some angles that make it look a bit odd, but I think partially that is down to the wheels on this one. I much prefer the wheels, the larger wheels on the higher GT model. But this one that I'm driving today is the base spec, which I was very pleasantly surprised about, actually. The on-the-road price starts from about 25 grand, and that's not bad for what you're getting, I'll be honest. When they delivered it to me, I got in the car and I started exploring some of the features in here. Like, you've got a 10.25 inch touchscreen with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. You've got lane keep assist, you've got cruise control, you've got a heated steering wheel, which actually is an option even on high-end cars like Bentleys in some cases. Turning circle is actually really good for this length of car as well. So as I say, this GT line model actually comes with loads of kit for the money. I think if you were to spend 25k on a similarly spec'd Ford Focus or Skoda Octavia, well, they might be a little bit more spacious, a little bit more practical in estate form compared to this sort of coupe-like body shape, but I don't think you're actually going to get that much more equipment. In fact, this might actually have a more generous spec for that money. If you want to step it up to the next level, you get the GT Line S, which starts from about 27 grand, and that includes things like an upgraded sound system, some slightly better styling quirks, and also a panoramic roof. And rather than the 6-speed manual transmission that I've got in this car, you can also opt for a 7-speed dual clutch item. And in fairness, the manual transmission in this isn't actually that bad. It's got quite a short throw, it can be notchy at times, but it's quite a satisfying change between gears. The clutch is relatively light, although it doesn't give you much feedback around town, which can be annoying in traffic. So for that reason, I'd probably go for the automatic. I've had a few people in this car and they've mentioned to me, well, why would you buy a manual as a daily now? And yeah, I mean, unless you're doing lots of taking the car to the limit and doing lots of driving around country lanes and where places like I am now, I don't really think particularly that you're going to be that bothered about driving a manual. In town, it's just a bit frustrating nowadays, especially as we're transitioning to EVs. But it's nice that the option is there. It's a cheaper option. Obviously, it's easier to kind of service and that kind of thing. But at the same time, it does provide a bit more driving engagement. And it's not exactly the worst car to drive in the Benz either. You know, you'd kind of expect, being a relatively big family hatch, that it wouldn't actually handle that well, and in fairness, it does grip quite well. This entry-level car has a 1.5 turbo with just over 150 horsepower, and it's quite sprightly. What really surprised me about it is how low down the turbo kicks in, so there's not an incredible amount of turbo lag. The turbo boost kicks in about 1500 RPM and goes all the way up to 3,500, so that's kind of where your real power is. It means that round town the car's really quick off its feet, which is nice, and there's not really too much in the way of hesitation when you're pulling away, which is always a bit of a concern in these lower capacity engines with a turbo, but in actual fact in this car it's not too bad at all. It does mean, however, that once you get to sort of 3,500, 4,000 RPM, that's when it kind of runs out of puff, so there's no point taking it to the red line. You might as well change up to stay in boost, almost like you would with a diesel. If you want something a bit faster, you can step up to the GT, which is the top end model, about £30,000. Now, if you go for one of them, you get a 200 horsepower 1.6 turbo, and that is probably the one to go for. It's mated with the 7-speed dual clutch auto, and it's going to have a little bit more guts than this at motorway speeds. Round town though, if you don't do a lot of motorway driving, I would say this one is perfectly sufficient. Traction control kicked in. So I'm going to keep it in second. We're taking quite a tight roundabout here, and you don't really notice the length of the car at all. Give it a bit of a bootful. Sounds a bit gruff because obviously you're pushing that low capacity engine to the limit, but it picked up quite nicely there, and I saw the speed limit quite easily. So it's only when you get to those higher end speeds, you know, 60, 70 mile an hour plus, that's when it's really going to struggle. That little beep that you just heard there is the lane keep assist, which actually in this car I find really useful. In some cars I've driven in the past, it can be a bit intrusive, and I find that it kind of pulls you a bit too hard and it's a bit disconcerting. But in this one, it feels quite comfortable. It's light enough that it doesn't interfere too much, but it does assist when you're doing that high-speed motorway driving. So performance-wise, it's not going to knock your socks off, but it does grip okay, and I've been really surprised with the way it handled itself. In terms of the way the car feels, it actually feels a lot smaller than it is, I think. It doesn't feel its length at all, which is nice. It's really manoeuvrable around town. The turning circle is really good for this length of car as well. The only thing that is a little bit disappointing is the visibility out of the rear, but that's to be expected with this sloping roofline. The rear window is quite small, but the best thing about that is there is a rear camera as standard, and down here by the gear lever there is a button to activate it at any time. So if you need to look out the back for whatever reason, you can do that with a push of a button rather than having to go into reverse, which is actually really handy when the rear visibility isn't great. Aside from that though, out of the front and the sides, I'm quite comfortable, and the bonnet is fairly short, so when you're looking out the front, it's quite easy to manoeuvre, even more so than some other smaller hatchbacks that I've tested recently. Talking of space, in here it's relatively generous as well. You've got the 600 litres of space in the boot, and there's a lot of that is under floor cubbies, but they're actually quite useful, and you've got all the kind of shopping hooks and everything in the back there as well should you need them, so it's quite nicely organised as an area. And there's a lot of hints in this car. They've really thought things out. Some of the stuff in this infotainment system I've been really surprised with. Even silly things like at night when you turn the wipers on, it comes up on the screen in the cluster to say that you've done that, and that's something that I don't have in my Seat, which really annoys me because I can't always tell what's going on. So that's a nice quality of life addition. And talking of that, when you get in the car and turn it on, it automatically assigns to the most recent profile that you've selected, but you can also select a different profile. So if you've got multiple people sharing a car in a family, you can change it to their settings so that all of their radio stations and their climate controls and all of their settings for the car instantly change to how they like it. And you can do that at the press of a button on startup. There's also 2 programmable buttons, one on the steering wheel, one on the navigation system, which you can customise to a shortcut of your choosing. There's a voice Memos app, which means that if you're on the move and you think of something that you want to jot down, but you're driving so you can't, you can just make note of it in the voice app, and therefore you don't need to worry about forgetting whatever it was. You don't have to pull over to write it down. You can just have it there for later. Silly little things like that. It just makes me think, well, why did nobody else think of that? So there's some real merits for the Kia. They've really thought of these little things. And it extends to the space in the cabin in terms of practicality as well, because even though you've got this kind of sloping roofline, there is enough headroom in the back for me at 6 foot, sitting behind myself. In my driving position, there's plenty of legroom back there, and there's still a few inches of headroom for long journeys as well. The only time you might struggle is if you want to fit 3 adults in the back, because it's quite narrow in the centre, so you might find that it's cramped back there on longer journeys, so I wouldn't recommend that, but kids would be just fine. And talking to kids, the Isofix Points in the back actually are really good as well, because they're the kind of fold-in type. They're not the covers that you take off and lose like you find in some Volkswagen Audi Group cars. The overall quality of everything in here surprised me as well. Not only is all the materials kind of fairly decent. Like, you've got this squidgy material up here, and you've got squidgy material on the armrest here. The armrests are nicely positioned to rest on when you're doing long distance driving. The steering wheel I really, really like. It's got this really squidgy leather to it, which is really nice. And it's got lots of physical buttons with these nice toggle switches, which I love. I hate the new touch buttons that are on the new Golf. That just really annoys me. It's flat bottomed, it looks attractive, it's got the nice mix of leather and the stitching. The only complaint I have about it is it's a little bit thin. I'd like it to be slightly chunkier. I'm not talking BMW chunky, I'm just talking a little bit more like the Volkswagen Golf or sort of equivalent car like that. These seats are really nice as well. I would like a little bit more adjustment, but I can get a really nice driving position out of them. And overall, I really like the design and the mix of materials. I think it looks quite attractive and modern. And I'd say they're comfortable for long journeys. The headrest feels just right to me. Sometimes I get in a car and I feel like the headrest isn't quite in the right place, especially for me with my dodgy neck. But this one is really nice. Like, it's just in the right place that you can rest your head exactly how you want to, which I really like about it. And all of the switchgear feels quite nice as well. Physical climate controls I'm obsessed with, because they've got the little screens on for the temperature, so they look nice, but they're all physical controls. The buttons all feel good. Heated steering wheel, again, I'm really impressed that it has that as standard, and you've got heated seats as well, amazing. These are things that you'd pay money for with other manufacturers. This is what I love about Kia and the other brands that are kind of geared towards more of a low-end market, because they include such great value for money. The only grand complaint I've got about here is this nice squidgy leather that they've put, or pleather that they've put up here on the dash to make it look a bit more upmarket and feel nice. It does reflect off of the window quite a bit on a sunny day, and there's also quite a bit of reflection on these analog dials on the glass on a sunny day under direct sunlight as well. But that's me nitpicking. You know, you only really notice that on a really sunny day, and you know, I'd rather have them there and it look nice than not have them at all. And on the higher end models, you get a digital dash instead of the analog dials anyway, so that complaint would go away with that regardless. I'm going to drop down into seconds. I've come out onto the roundabout and I'm going all the way around, and let's see if the car tries to step out on me at all. Do you know what? Even under moderate load, my Cupra would have lost traction there and it would have tried to squirrel around. But I suppose because of the length of this car, it does feel quite nice. You've not got that same worry. It feels relatively planted. And what I was really surprised about is that Kia fit Michelins from the factory. There's not a lot of companies that do that. A lot of companies cheap out on the tyres from factory. And it's nice to see that on a sort of a lower end product. You know, I mean, not to say that this feels low end, but it's on the lower end of the market at a starting price of 25 grand, but it doesn't feel that way, and that's what I've been most impressed with. But the thing that really impressed me about the day-to-day living of this car isn't necessarily anything to do with the driving either. Even though it handles quite well, it's quite well planted, nice turning circle, and it feels nice on the road. The infotainment was what really did it for me, because every Volkswagen Audi Group product I've got in recently has a really nice big touchscreen, yeah, great, and there's a lot of nice graphics and things work quite well, but there's always lag. There's always lag on the animations, there's always crashing between apps and a bit of stuttering, and it just doesn't feel very premium. This thing feels like using an iPad. Everything is instant. Even when using Apple CarPlay, everything just works. It's just instant. It's never ever crashed on me. I've been driving this for sort of 4 or 5 days now, and it's not skipped a beat. The screen itself is a bit of a smudge fest because it's glossy, but it's not the end of the world. It's vibrant. The colours aren't as good as what I've seen in the newest cars from BMW and Mini, but I do like the widescreen format for the Apple CarPlay. And everything's really, really responsive, which I love. It just makes things feel so much less clunky, and I really appreciate that from Kia. The other quirk about the infotainment that I like as well is that when you're using the sat-nav, it projects the sound just out of the driver's speaker, so it's kind of projected just at you, and it doesn't affect the music in the rest of the car, which I really like that. I think that's a really nice touch, and it's not something that I've really seen in any other cars besides BMW and Mini. None of the Volkswagen Audi Group stuff does it, and I do like it. The only thing I'm not particularly keen on, and this is me being really nitpicky, is the positioning of the armrest in the centre. It just kind of interferes with the, well, it's not so much the armrest, it's more the cup holder positioning. You can't really fit 2 large cups in there without moving the armrest out of the way. But everything else is quite well placed. The steering is exceptionally light, which makes it really manoeuvrable around town. And as I say, it feels a lot smaller than it is, which is great for manoeuvrability. The only downside is it's not quite as good for motorways, but I don't really think it's the end of the world because you've got the lane keep assist and it feels very sure of itself on centre as well. So I'd have no trouble doing long distances in this at all. In fact, the only quality complaint I really have about this car is the door handles. They feel a bit cheap and nasty, and on this car it's only done 2,500 miles, but the driver's one feels a bit loose and squeaky, which feels a bit naff. And also you have to press the button to do the central locking rather than have a touch sensor on there, which doesn't feel great. Of course, the tailgate as well on this one is manual, being the entry-level model. You can get the electric one if you step up to the next model up, so I would probably do that anyway. But that being said, Kia offers one of the best warranties in the industry, 7 years or 100,000 miles. So I'm sure if you took it back to a dealer, they'd probably sort that out for you. And that's the thing, that's where the value for money comes. I guess you could go out and you could get a Focus Estate, which might be a little bit more fun to drive than this, a bit more engaging. You could get an Octavia Estate, not quite a VRS for that money, but one of the SEL models perhaps. And you'd probably get a similar amount of equipment. I would argue that the styling of the Octavia is really good, especially in estate guys, so that's definitely one to consider. But if you want a fastback like this, something with coupe styling but still the estate practicality, the only real option is to step up to the Mercedes CLA, and you're not going to get the same level of equipment standard. You're going to have to pay a lot extra, and yeah, it might be a little bit more comfy. It's not going to be quite as firm as this, but you know, it's a lot more money. They start from about 33, 34 grand. But you will have to go for one of the rivals if you want a hybrid or a diesel, because the only two engines now offered in the Proceed are this 1.5 turbo or the extra power in the 1.6 turbo. If you want something slightly more practical, you could even get a Seed Sportswagen, which is effectively the same car as this, but without the sloping roofline. It's got a more practical estate form factor. But I think this one's the one to go for, just because of how good it looks. In terms of running costs then, this 1.5 turbo model has been averaging for me about 40 miles per gallon, and that's with mixed driving, so a bit of town, bit of highway. So around town it's been averaging sort of 30 to 35, and then motorway 40 to 45. So the average is somewhere bang around the middle, and that's not too bad, is it really? I mean, unless you're really thrashing it on the motorway, that's when you're going to notice a drop in economy. Again, I would probably opt for the higher power version because there's not a massive price difference. When you factor in the lease deals that are available on these, which you can find if you look in the description below, you'll find the best lease deals available on this car by clicking my affiliate link to Lease Loco. But Kia also do really good finance deals, and of course their warranty is great. So then, the Kia Proceed. It's not going to blow your socks off in terms of a driver's car, but it does hold its own. It really does grip in the bends, and it can be fun to drive because it's planted enough because of its size and weight. It's not going to set your hair on fire in terms of its acceleration, but it's really nippy around town thanks to the turbo that kicks in really low down. And on the motorway, it's going to be a comfortable cruiser thanks to the good lane keep assist, comfortable wheel and comfortable seats. It's a niche product, but the Kia Proceed does it relatively well. And despite its small shortcomings, I would say unless you're looking for a performance car, then you could do far worse than one of these for a practical family car. So my pick of the range then, I think for most people who aren't too bothered about performance, would probably be the mid-range model, the GT Line S with the 7-speed dual clutch auto, because that's going to be the best as a daily driver. And with stuff like a pan roof, that's stuff you pay a lot of money for with other manufacturers, and the same with the heated steering wheel. This provides all the practicality and those really nice little quality of life features at a really reasonable price. That model will run you about 27 grand, which you could get on a great lease deal or on a good finance deal with Kia. So there we have it, guys. Thank you so much again for watching this video. Please like, subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'm doing plenty of these new car reviews now, as well as my own projects. And of course, if you want to find the best lease deal on a new car, find my affiliate link for Lease Loco below, where you can compare the absolute best lease deals on the UK market. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to Kia for lending me one of their press fleet vehicles. Hopefully have some more for you guys very soon. Bye bye.